Whoa. -4, dude, that's insane.
Yeah, it's gonna be a cold one, and then it's supposed to get down to like -16 tonight, I think.
That's
And
the
then
what's the coldest you've ever experienced in your life?
-20. It was -20 to -25 or something like that. That was when we lived at Fort Drum. It
What's
gets
that?
real cold. It's upstate New York, like Syracuse.
Uh-huh.
This is
Yeah, yeah.
an hour and 20 minutes north of Syracuse.
It's like Canada.
It is. It's so then like when you're driving up the highway, the road sign is like Fort Drum, and then the next thing is Canada.
Yeah.
So it's like pretty close to Kingston. It's right off Lake Ontario, so you get that good like lake effect snow.
Fuck,
It's
dude.
I loved it. I thought it was great,
You
man.
like it?
It first of all, like I did like cold already, but it being up there like completely reorganized my system to like really love the cold. It's like my favorite temperature is like I love when it's 30 degrees and sunny out. I think that's perfect. Like it's nice and
Below
crisp,
freezing and sunny.
gets your blood moving. You just feel like fresh. When it's like this, like I went to the grocery store today and it was like 2 degrees when I was out there, and that like it's not as nice, but I think it's a fun temperature. Like I think it's a funny temperature. Like it's funny to be outside when it's like that cold. I think it's great.
Dude, fuck that. What do you wear? Like, what do you wear? Where'd you say you went? To the grocery store?
Yeah, just the grocery store. So I had like a neck gaiter, I had my coat, and then gloves, and then I also have like a pretty fuzzy hat that'll help out.
Uh-huh.
If it's in the negatives, I would probably wear more than that, especially if I'm going to be outside for longer. But like if I'm just
Theoretically, if you go
going,
to the grocery store, you could just like sprint from your door to the from your front door to the car, and from the car to into the grocery store, right? And like,
yeah, honestly, like I didn't wear my hat into the grocery store because I was like, I'm going to be taking off my coat once I get
yeah,
in there anyway. So
that's the thing. I remember just in like high school in Georgia,
yeah,
like not liking that. Like, what do I do with this fucking coat? I would lose so many coats in
yep.
high school, middle school. My mom would be so frustrated with me. I can't keep up with this shit. Yeah, dude, I can't do it. I mean, I obviously, if I had to, I could. But I remember living in DC for a couple years was
Yeah,
fucking. I don't know, man. You don't get
love
depressed.
it. Look, I'm already depressed. Like that's the thing. Like my whole life
You
I was
can't get any
depressed.
lower than this.
Like my whole life I was already depressed. So it like doesn't really affect me any more than just like the day to day. So like I love the cold. The cold gets me energized. So it kind of works the opposite way. Especially like if I've got to shovel snow, that's like my favorite physical activity to do. Cause you got like you can see progress you're making. You're like out there in the cold. You warm up real fast, so it's just like you in a sweatshirt, just like shoveling snow. I
Yeah,
love it.
yeah. Did you do the river? Hop in the river at the bachelor party?
No, I actually didn't do that. I slept pretty late because you guys everyone other there was on East Coast time, and I was like, no, man, I'll let you guys do what you're gonna do. I got out there to watch Corey and Ford fly fish, but
Okay.
everyone was like rushing inside when I came out.
Do you know Wim Hof is?
William Hoff.
Wim, just
Oh, I don't.
Wim. At least he's Dutch. Wim Hof.
I don't think so.
Wimhof. He's
Is
a
he a like a wellness guy? Like a
yeah, kind of guru guy. I don't know what his
sure.
educational background is necessarily, but he's all about breath in the cold.
Yeah. So there are so many people I know from the army that are like that now. Like, hey, bro, now that I'm like a fitness coach or a wellness guy or a like I'm a tech bro now, but I'm also still in touch with the army, and they're all about cold plunging and
Yeah,
deep breathing
yeah.
and
That's Wim
cold
Hof.
and then hot and then cold and then hot. I'm like, yeah, I
Yeah.
get it.
I think he's kind of I'm not the hot stuff, but I think he's kind of the godfather of that kind of cold shit. He
Yeah.
did all the crazy shit anyway. That's the thing. I guess there's a benefit to it. I fucking do everything in my life to avoid it, literally, and like where I live, like rearrange my life so I don't have to experience any cold. It was 40
Yeah.
degrees yesterday morning. Speaking of, that was the coldest. We had a low 40, and so I wanted to feel what it was like. So I went on, it was 41. That's the lowest I think That's about as low as it's gonna get. Is about as low as it's gonna get. It's fucking cold, dude. I woke
Yeah.
up, I put basically this on, hoodie, pants, and like Under Armour tights and Under Armour shirt, and then hoodie pants on top, and just went for a walk around the block. You know, obviously it wasn't like a shoe or anything, but it was like, okay, this is, you know, pushing cold. But people in LA freak out, man. That's like parents freaking out their kids are, having their jackets on and shit.
Yeah. Whereas for me, in the spring, when it's like, oh, I look at the temperature readout for the next week, and it's like every day the low is like 48 and the high is like creeping up to 70. I'm like, God damn it, here we go.
Dude, I fucking love it. What's dude? We went to Legoland the other day.
Oh yeah,
Have you ever
I'm
been to
rebuilding
Legoland?
Legos right now. Yeah,
Have you ever
how's
been to
that?
a Lego? Were you super into Legos as a kid?
Kind of, yeah. My parents had been keeping like all my old stuff in the basement, and so I guess 2 summers ago, I like realized I had a box of my old Legos. And I was like, I actually did have like a good amount of Legos back in the day.
Mhm.
And so I like put them all in bags and took them home on my carry-on. And then
These are them.
yeah, I love Legos, man.
This big ass box right here behind you, this black one.
Box behind me. I don't see. I've got stuff on the
Other side,
wall.
that way. That way. Yeah, right there.
Over here.
About yeah,
Oh,
that. No,
these are,
behind
yeah,
it, behind that
these
in the
are
background.
Lego. Those are to be built Legos. Yeah.
Okay, 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 okay.
Yeah,
Dang.
those are boxes of
Wait, you
Legos.
brought those all back in a carry-on?
No, 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 no. Those are like Legos I've acquired as a grown man. But
Oh, okay. I was about to say, dang.
I had all these like sets
Those
from
look
the
like broken
90s, like
Legos.
classic old school, like yeah. It's one of the many, many, many reasons that my wife's not allowed to die on me. Cause like, look,
This is the primary one, though.
this is not gonna get me a replacement mother for my children. They're like, oh, look at all the Legos that guy has. Wow. I definitely want to be a stepmom now. Like, nope. Like, sorry, you gotta stay alive, sweetheart.
Yeah, but 8-year-olds will love you. Legoland was great. Okay, anyway, where did we leave off with your life story? We were like in the military, right?
Yeah, we were about to my wife and I were about to part ways for 6 months while she was pregnant, and then come back together right before I deployed again.
Part ways 6 months while she was pregnant. Or
So in the army, after your first couple of years, when you're getting promoted from lieutenant to captain, you have to take like another 6 month training course. So
uh-huh.
you start out doing like your basic officer job course. So I went to intelligence school. She
Okay.
went to like quartermaster school, but then you have to do it again after a couple of years for like the next level of training. And so I had to go back to the intel center, and she had to go back to the logistics center. And so we had decided that after like our second major deployment, we would start trying to have kids.
Okay.
And so that was like right before we so I got home from Afghanistan. We worked on if we could get pregnant, and then within, I don't know, 5 months, yeah, December, January, February, March. So yeah, within 4 months she got pregnant. And then in March we both got in cars and drove opposite ways across the country. So I drove to Arizona, she drove to Virginia. And for me, I had like the best time. I had two roommates, one of whom we knew pretty well from West Point, but the other one was just a woman that he knew from elsewhere in our unit. So I
Mhm.
didn't really know her that well, but they were like great roommates. We had a little house together. I had our dog. So I was having a blast. She was increasingly pregnant with a roommate that was really annoying and like not that fun. So it was like we had opposite experiences. I had the best time at the career course. My squad, we had like 16 people in our squad, three of whom were foreign guys. So one was from Latvia, one was from Czech Republic, and one was from Bolivia. and they were cool as hell, and the rest of
Well,
the squad was cool as hell.
they're all citizens, like nationals of these countries, and their
Yeah.
militaries
So
are they're doing.
part of our like diplomacy is taking international students to military schools. So like in my lieutenant course, we had 4 Saudis in our class.
Mhm.
This time we had a much more diverse set, and we had a bunch. So my whole class was like 64 people, and I guess like 16 of them were internationals. And then within my squad, we had 3 internationals who were all like just cool dudes, like really fun guys to be around. And then the rest of the squad was like a bunch of really fun people. And then within that group of 16, 4 of us had our first kids all due within the same week period. So it was like
You had all
from
kind of
November,
executed the same family
we
planning
were all
plan.
in the same kind of like cycle, you know? So like from November 1st to November 7th, there were 4 babies all due that were all within that squad. And we were all like first time
How
parents.
old are y'all? What age is this?
Let's see, I was 26 when I got there, turned
Okay.
27. So
Okay.
like we're all kind of like, you feel like you're getting older, you know, like I'm in my late 20s now, but like you're still pretty young and still got a lot of, like, and so everyone had also kind of deployed once or twice. And so we're also starting to like, everyone's kind of dealing with PTSD for the first time. And um, again, because like for me, I'm just a really kind of approachable, friendly guy that I don't really threaten people, like no one's like, oh, this guy's going to make me feel bad about myself. Like, I'm just like this scrawny, nice guy. So, like,
Mhm.
there were a lot of nights where just like your buddy comes over, you sit in the backyard looking at the Huachuca Mountains, and drink a lot of whiskey and talk about the like horrendous things you guys have seen over the last 3, 4 years,
Mhm.
and like it was cathartic in some ways, but it was also like for me a reminder that like I just felt like I'd never done enough, like oh well, like this friend has done harder, worse, more traumatic shit than I have, like, which is also one of those critical mistakes that you make in the mental health journey is like trying to compare trauma. That's never a solution because trauma is trauma and comparing your trauma is never going to heal you at all. Like you
I
have
think
to
you told
face
me
the
that at Mayo's bachelor party.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like we all want to feel like, well, if I've suffered the most, then I've earned the right to like recover. But if someone else has suffered more, like
Right.
I really shouldn't. Like, no, you should be able to say, like, oh, I have trouble. But
Mhm.
none of us knew any of that yet. None of us knew we could go to therapy. None of us knew that it wouldn't end our army career or anything. So,
So none of
it
y'all in
was,
therapy at the time.
no, no.
Whoa.
I'm trying to
That's
think of
not just like
anyone I knew.
that's not just like standard mode when you would think they'd have. I could understand like in deployment why that might be logistically difficult. We are like therapy sessions when they're trying to fucking run a war. But when you come back, you'd think that just like standard
No, man.
procedure when you after a deployment.
The army has really struggled to like catch up to realizing things like, hey, therapy is going to be a force multiplier. Like, not only to deal with things instead of worse equipped. It's one of those things that they're just real slow on the uptake, and that's a bummer. It would take me so that this was 2014. It would take me 4 more years to actually, oh no, 3 more years before I started therapy, and that had to be a like rock bottom kind of situation.
Whoa. Is this, do you think, to the best of your knowledge, is it still like that today?
It's getting better. But part of the reason it's getting better is because people like me, just like once I started going to therapy, I started telling everybody, like, hey, I'm going to therapy. I'll be gone for the next hour and a half, but I'll be
Yeah.
back. And you should go to therapy too. Everyone should. It's great. And hey, if you don't go to therapy now, then you're not going to get a VA rating for it. The big thing about like the army when you get out is when they look at your whole body and they say, well, we broke this and this and this, so we'll pay you for all that. If you don't go to the doctor, they
Yeah.
don't think that anything happened. So if you break
Uh-huh.
your leg and then you just like tie a rag around it and don't tell anyone, then in 10 years you say, hey, well, I broke my leg in the army. They're like, well, that's not on your record, so I don't care.
Right.
So it's like, for the very least of it, like if you want to get the VA to recognize that they owe you something, go see someone and see what happens. Like it's not going to ruin your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
But it takes a lot of effort to convince people like, don't worry, this isn't going to ruin your life or ruin your career.
you could, and that affects how much money you're earning after in your pension and disability and shit like that, correct?
Yeah, it affects your disability when they say like, oh, we fucked you up, with mental health, so we owe you the ability to at least get treatment or whatever it is.
And that's paid out just like a broken femur.
Yeah, it's part of all of the types of ways that medical care would be handled.
Do you get additional money for everything? Are there dudes like smashing themselves with hammers and shit, like shooting their feet on the way out?
Kind of, yeah. So like there's a whole industry of people who like try and help you get your rating higher. So like if you leave the army and they say, well, you're like 80% disabled, there are companies that are like, hey, we can work with you to try and get you to 100% disabled based
Oh,
on, this and that. And some people do make it almost like an Olympic event. That always made me real uncomfortable. Like, again, I didn't join the army feeling like I know what the benefits are and it's going to help me. I was always like surprised by benefits when they
yeah,
happened.
yeah,
But some people do kind of try and I think that's kind of skeevy. I don't like it, and it
yeah,
makes me uncomfortable when people are like, "Yeah, I think
yeah.
I'm
I'm
really going to
sure,
get
but
my rating
still,
up." But
yeah, yeah. I mean, I
on the
see
other
both sides of
hand,
it, obviously. I'd rather not, because having it just bloats the entire
right?
thing. But I get it. I
But
mean,
if,
a rational actor is, people are going to do that certainly.
yeah, absolutely.
Um, Damn. Okay, so what was the impetus then? You're 26 here at this point. Did you deploy after that?
So after a couple months at the career course, you start looking at what your next assignment is going to be. And so they give you a whole list of like, here are all the places you could go. Can you rank order them for us so we know where you really want to go? And we'll try and align what the Army needs and kind of what you want. And so with my wife also getting that list, we had to kind of compare notes and kind of submit a similar looking list. Well, right at the top of they have in parentheses each base that is going to be deploying units. So if you're like, yeah, I'd love to go to, Fort Hood in this brigade because you know that they're going to deploy, you know, that's something you can rank order high or rank order really low, depending on what you want. Well, part of the problem there is that, like, at that point, I'm addicted to the feeling of being deployed. Like, I can't get around how much I love that feeling.
Hmm.
And, like, so I'm talking to my wife, and I'm like, well, we'd love to be in the DC area, so we'll put a couple of those bases kind of towards the top. But if we also want to put like a standard, like regular army base where it's like big infantry units that do big army regular things, let's just put Fort Drum because, I like the sound of Fort Drum. She's like, okay, I guess like I can put that down. But like I knew that Fort Drum had the parentheses deployment opportunities on it, and that most people don't think of that far upstate New York to an infantry unit that's like at the time units from Fort Drum were the most deployed units ever in the army. Like they deployed the most of every other unit. And so I'm like, well, look, we'll just put it on the list and see what happens. And in the back of my mind, I kind of was thinking,
Hmm.
if we put it anywhere close to the top, they're going to say, yeah, send. Can you hear me? All
Kill.
right. Where do we cut off?
You're at foot. You knew if you put for
Drum.
what's it called at the top of the list,
Drum.
it would be you'd be selected.
Yeah.
Did
So,
she not understand this? Does she not get this?
I mean, I'm sure she did, but there was also like a
Massive
degree to
tower of
which
Legos.
we were kind of in denial about it. Like, oh, I mean, it's not that bad. And like, we'll see. And if that's where the army wants us, that's where the army wants us. Trying not to like, but really, I knew in my heart that like I wanted to go again,
Mm,
and it was. I could have plausible deniability with it and be like, oh no, that's not what I'm trying to do. But I think it really was.
mm.
Um, but so then we find that out probably mid June. So then I have like from June to September to just keep having a fucking ball at the career course, like
What are
just
you doing
hanging.
during the day? You're in like class?
Yeah, you have PT in the morning, which at that point in the army is like you and your friends just like going to work out together. It's like way less formal than like annoying like army
Right,
formation stuff. So it's
right,
just like you have formation at, I don't know, 6, and then like you and your best friends can go on a run together or go do a circuit workout or do
right.
whatever. And it's a blast. Like we negotiated to have every Friday we had sports PT, and so we had this whole like basically ultimate football tournament. And again, and like my squad was amazing at it because like we had some really really good athletes, and then the rest of us were like quietly good athletes. So
Yeah,
like I don't look like a really good athlete, but I was way better than people thought I would be.
yeah, and
So
you've
it
all
was
been in
like
the army for 5 years.
we're just pulling off, like we are just having the time of our lives. And so after PT, then you have class, but class doesn't last all that long. So by like 3 or 4 in the afternoon, you're done. And so we had a whole group of like several guys lived in the same apartment complex, and like everyone's spouses were also cool as hell. And so we would like go to the pool at this apartment complex, just like hang out with all these pregnant wives and cool dudes and play can jam and like cook
Oh,
out. And
great.
it was amazing. And we're in southern Arizona, which is great. Like these beautiful mountains, you're going on hikes, and like it was just really really fun. And plus like the stuff we're doing in class, you know if you've spent the last several years of your life doing like intense high level intelligence, and then like your next job is just to like learn the basics of intelligence, class is both easy and fun because you already know all the stuff. And so you're just like hanging out and getting good grades. And like,
Mhm.
it's like how would you solve this problem? Like, oh, I know exactly how I'd solve this problem because I've solved that type of problem before. I would do this and this and this and this. Oh, great answer. Like, I know, right? Like it was just an embarrassment of riches that you're hanging out with all these great people and just having a ball.
Yeah.
And then in the back of my mind is like, and I might be going back, like, so
Is that the
I,
general sentiment amongst of
no,
your friends there that y'all want to go back? Does everyone want to go back?
no. I mean, most people were like, if I go back, I go back, whatever. A
Right.
lot of people are like, I went, I'd be happy to not go again. We had 2 people in our class that had never gone,
Hmm.
and everyone was a little bit like, what the fuck were you doing? Like,
Yeah.
and one of them was like really embarrassed, and he was like, I've got to get to a unit that's deploying. And so that's what he did. He like everything on his list was like deploying units. But then the other one, she was like, I don't really care if I go. And everyone was like, well, that makes you kind of a shitbag, but okay. And then I think she ended up going a couple of years later. But like at the time, we were all like, if you joined the army when we did and you're not willing to deploy, then what the fuck are you doing? But most people wouldn't have been as obsessed with it as I was. Most people were like, yeah, I liked it, or yeah, I loved the feelings of being deployed, but I'm also happy to not be going back again. And I was just like, put me back in, baby. Let's keep going, like roll the dice again. double or nothing, you know, just keep it
Mhm.
going. So we in September, we both finish our courses, start driving up to New York. By
How long
now,
was the like frat party in Arizona? How long was that training?
March to September, so
Oh,
like 6 months.
yeah,
And man, it was just a blast.
yeah.
You know, I think so fondly about it. I texted my sister once because, you know, when my family's experiencing different mental health things, we'll text each other and be like, "Hey, is this like common? Do you feel stuff like this?" I texted her and I was like, "I do we have any history of like manic behavior in our family? Like I'm feeling like crazy." She's like, "Well, describe what you're talking about."
This
And
is
I'm like,
after Arizona?
"This is in Arizona." I'm like,
In Arizona.
I'm feeling like I'm having a great time. I woke up and I'm just like feeling really good. I'm like just texting all my friends and talking about how much I love them. She was like, "Are you like buying drugs and like sleeping with sex workers?" I was like, "No." She's like, "I think you might just be happy." I was like, "What?" It's like, "Yeah, you're just describing what normal people experience like on a day-to-day level of like, yeah, I feel good today." I'm
Right.
like, "Oh, well, look at this."
Yeah.
Like I was just having a great time. Um,
Is that the first time
but
you ever felt like that in your life?
it might be, I don't know, because there it was just a unique confluence of like the perfect level of responsibilities to feel like I was accomplishing stuff, but wasn't like it was all perfectly within my wheelhouse and all like
Mhm.
really easy and fun and just surrounded by really good people without a lot of like major other life concerns. And it was great. But also like I knew I was going to be a dad soon, and so it was like, you know, it was also kind of the last hurrah of that, I guess, of just being like, I don't have to like wake up in the middle of the night and change diapers, so just
Mhm.
gonna enjoy that. Um, like the biggest parenting debacles I had to deal with were like my one roommate was like, "Hey, is it okay if I feed the dog from like my dinner plate?" I was like, "Don't feed her from your dinner plate. You can like give her people food, but like not just like here's my dinner." And then I would like catch him doing that and be like, "Hey, don't you go doing that." And that's like the most intense like domestic struggle I had, you know. um but also like one of my friends, he was so excited when I told everyone, because I didn't tell everyone that we were expecting a kid initially because it was still pretty early. So it wasn't until like May that we told people. And my buddy was so excited. He bought me like three or four of the like "you're gonna be a dad" books. But the problem is like the "you're gonna be a dad" books are all like trying to be too like, "Hey bro, so you're gonna be a dad, huh? Guess whose life is over." And they like try to be funny, but they make it sound so shitty. Like
Damn.
everything they said was like framed in this like, guess whose life is over."
Yeah.
So I just stopped reading those and kept reading the like mommy books because those are like filled with actual parenting advice and like
Okay.
information.
Yeah.
But um
Interesting.
yeah, it was really weird. I hope that the literature has changed a little bit to favor like just practical dad parenting advice. I don't know.
Right.
So we
Yeah.
get to Fort Drum. My wife is pretty pregnant. Our daughter was due. Well, we didn't know her gender until she was born. For both our kids, we didn't find out until like the delivery room.
Well,
But she was due like November 5th.
okay.
So like we show up, it's getting cold already in New York,
Hmm.
and everyone, it's like the peak time of Game of Thrones in everyone's life. So like everywhere we went, from like the realtors to like setting up your electric bill to just like signing in on posts, are like, "Oh, hey, guess what? Winter's coming." Like, yeah, we get you. Everyone is fucking. We've heard that 8 times today. Thank you. But when we were signing into posts, this is like 5 minutes into reporting in,
So,
they were like, "Hey, like, here's your unit that you're going to. Why don't you just drive by and say hi?" I drive to the headquarters. They're like, "We already know what battalion you're going to." And they print me off orders. And so right away, I'm going to an infantry battalion to be the infantry battalion intelligence officer. And 10 minutes after that, I'm meeting the commander, and he's like, yeah, we're deploying in 9 months. So we're like ready to go. And that's
Well,
like every one of my top dreams was like, I want to deploy as an infantry battalion S2. And that's like, they just handed it to me as soon as I got there. I was like, well, this is working out exactly like I wanted. So then, like, by the time I get into the unit and start, like, you know, learning who my team is and everything, my daughter is born. Some like backwoods New York hospital. It was terrible. It was like
Cool.
long labor, no doctor in sight, just like me and a nurse. And the
Is it
nurse
like
would
an
just,
army hospital, or there? I mean, this can't be like the for a lot
the
of people.
base was too small to have an army hospital. And so we're in like some backwoods civilian hospital that like doesn't have a major capability. And so it's
Oh,
just like me and this nurse for hours and hours. And she would just be like, okay, I'll be back, and leave for 45 minutes. I'd be like, I don't know what to do. Like,
so just you and your wife should chill in there.
it wasn't chilling because she was throwing up every contraction she had.
Oh God,
So it was
it's just
like
you and her.
just me and her, like in the thick of it. And then finally, I saw the head like 12 hours before she was born because she just kept slamming into my wife's pelvic bone and
Uh-huh.
couldn't come out. And so eventually went to an emergency C-section. And it was just like, it was bad. It was not a great way to like welcome your child in. It was very stressful and like
Yeah.
kind of scary. But then like they're both fine. They both did okay. And then this is like, I feel bad about this. There's not a lot I could do, but like then the army just like kept giving me shit to do. So they sent me to Fort Polk, Louisiana for basically 3 months. Like my daughter was born October 29th, and then November like 28th, I went to Fort Polk.
Oh,
I came back for Christmas and then left again January 2nd. And then got back again like March 5th. So I was there for almost 3 months straight, except for Christmas. And then,
it's going to Fort Polk, Louisiana.
oh, baby. So there's a major training center. It's called the Joint Readiness Training Center. And it's where you send your whole unit to go before a deployment, where you basically do like a practice deployment for a month.
Okay.
But before that, I love that every time we do this, I have to get over a like throat hump. So before that,
A lot of consecutive talking.
you send your staff down to do training to get like the staff on the same page to plan for the exercise.
Mm-hmm.
But we thought we were going to be the unit in charge of like training the Afghans. So they sent us to the training school for that. But then we ended up not being that battalion. That was another battalion in our brigade. But they also needed us to observe our sister brigade. So I went to a different unit's training for a month, watching them do the training. And then my unit showed up and we did another month of their training. So I was just in the swamp for 2 months straight,
Whoa.
just like my favorite moment. And I mean, you've got a lot of time in Louisiana, right? So you know what kind of swampy bayou kind of territory some of it is. Everyone hates Fort Polk because there's nothing there. It's is it Lynchburg, Louisiana? Something like that. It's like an hour away from Alexandria, Louisiana.
Uh,
And at some point between the two units, they do controlled burns in the swamp to try and there's a lot of ammo that gets like dropped or not expended, and it helps like with wildfires and to get rid of some of this ammo. So it's pouring down rain, it's on fire, and there are rounds cooking off everywhere. So it's also it's like
Whoa.
purple, like getting rained on, on fire, and getting shot at. It's great.
Whoa, dude, that's insane. It seems like the a more appropriate place to do the readiness training would be Southern Arizona and then Fort Polk for whatever else you're doing. It's like not exactly the geographical equivalent or climate equivalent to Afghanistan, fucking swampy ass Louisiana.
There's another training center in California that's a lot more like terrain appropriate,
Uh-huh.
but it's a bigger like desert kind of terrain, and they send like heavy units there. So if you have like
Uh-huh.
tanks and
What's it called?
heavy NTCs.
Computers. There we go.
That works.
I think my computer's just old. I got this laptop in 2017.
Yeah, it's getting pretty old for a laptop.
Yeah, it's never given me problems until these Zoom calls, honestly. So, but dude, I fucking love MacBooks. Wait, am I recording? Okay, cool. All right. What did I say? Swampy Arizona. Oh, California. Another thing. What's it called in California?
National Training Center. There's one in Germany also. I think those are the three main ones. But
Where are they? They're in the desert.
yeah, they're at let's see, Fort Irwin. It's a couple hours from Vegas. It's northeast of LA, kind of out
It's
in the
called
desert.
like Barstow or Lancaster or
Maybe. I don't know. I've never been to NTC actually, so
okay. Anyway, okay. So you're there, fucking apocalyptic swamp fire, fucking live round explosion.
but it's also awesome because I'm like with my soldiers, like training up for this deployment, all them. So I'm 27 at this point, and they think I'm like the oldest person alive. They're like, this dude is ancient. Two of them had graduated high school less than a year before.
Whoa.
Three of them were teenagers, and I think four of them were under 21.
Whoa.
So like these were kids, and so it was exciting, man. It was like real fun to be like, we are getting ready to go to war together, people. Like let's train, let's get to know each other, and let's do this. And I loved it. And then we get back in March, and by then it's time to like start packing shit up because we're leaving soon. So we're like packing up, Connexes and putting them on boats and like shipping things over to Afghanistan. And then because of the way the war was at that point, like there were so few units in Afghanistan that like our whole brigade, which my first deployment, my brigade was in one little province. Now my brigade was going to be like half of the ground forces in all of Afghanistan. So we're like all over the place. So
Whoa.
we started sending people in March for my brigade. Um, I was not able to take most of my soldiers. They let me take, see, so I had 13 soldiers that I was like the captain of. I was able to take my lieutenant, my senior NCO, and those were the only people that were going to be like in my direct control. I snuck one of my sergeants onto the deployment in like kind of he would be
Cargo.
helping me, but not really. Say again?
Like stuck him on the cargo plane.
Yeah, more or less. I was like, he can come and he can figure out what he's going to do, and it's going to be great because he was desperate. He had a twin brother who had been deployed to Africa for the last year, and his brother was like always making fun of him for having not deployed yet. And he was like, I've got to get over there.
Hmm.
And then most of my other soldiers the army had a system where you would take the intelligence section and take individual soldiers and like plug them into the rifle companies, and they would be like a little tiny intel team at the company level. And so they would like recruit little infantrymen to train in like intelligence, and then they would like do all the pre-briefings and debriefings for patrols and like pass information up to me, and I'd pass information down. So I was like convincing all these company commanders to integrate my soldiers into their units so they would take them. And so I got most of my soldiers deployed, but most of them were not with me. Instead, I had, I think, 12 civilian contractors that
Whoa.
I fell in on. So these are some of these people had been in Afghanistan for like 8 years straight and like hadn't been home, and were
What?
just like random American like mercenaries basically. And I hated that. It's
Where
like
did 8 years?
it's a bunch of ex-military people that their numbers don't contribute to the numbers of us saying like soldiers on the ground.
Right.
So a way for the military to get around when like the president says we only have 8,000 people in Afghanistan, they
Yeah.
mean 8,000 like uniformed military.
Right.
There's also like maybe 8,000 more civilian contractors that are
Right.
like doing supporting jobs. And so I hated that because I spent 9 months like training my soldiers, building my team, have all these like young, excited people like wanting to do their best for their country. And instead, I've got all these like, you know, 40 to 65-year-old jaded mercenary dudes who are like, yeah, I don't really give a shit about this mission, but I do get a whole lot of cash for this job. Like I
What
hate it.
percent contractors are like pulling triggers and stuff or carrying guns, and what percentage of them are like engineers or some kind of shit?
They're all supposed to be in like supporting roles. Some of them would be issued weapons for like personal protection, but most not. Like none of mine had weapons. So we would have like a couple guys who were like civilian advisors, and they might go on patrol with us and carry a weapon. But like one dude I went on a patrol with, he had a weapon and body armor, but it was like the shared weapon and body armor for his whole like group. So if any of them ever went out, they would just trade off. So instead of
Well,
having your own, it was like, oh, this guy's gonna go on a mission. Like, here's our rifle. Like,
uh,
and
what is
I like it just
it?
bummed me out so much.
They like have like they work like 9 to 5.
They had so that's another great part of it that I hated was like they had hours that they worked, and I was like, "What are you talking about? Hours that we work? Like we're at war. We're in a combat. How do you like calculate hours for that? Like I'm never off the clock, but they
Right?
like have
Cares? It's just their job. That's what yeah.
it's just their job. They have hours sheets that we have to like approve. They have their specific statement of work that like that's the only thing they can do. So if you're like, oh my God, we've got this thing that we need to like research or study, they're like, oh, it's not really my job. Like, well, great. Any of my like 19-year-old soldiers would have done this, but I guess you're a 50-year-old dude who got out of the army after 4 years and doesn't care. So fuck me, right?
Right.
Like it was very frustrating. And the mission was really weird. So, like, we were at Kandahar Airfield, and it was like probably half my battalion is there. And our whole job was just to secure like the airfield and the like advisor perimeter. So between the airfield and Kandahar City, which is the second biggest city in the country. So we have this like, 12-mile radius where we're constantly patrolling. But other than that, like we couldn't really project a lot of other power. And so the Afghans are in control of like, 99% of the terrain in the country. And that war is going terribly. So we're great. Like we're doing fine. But everywhere around us is like burning down and is horrendous, and we can't do a thing about it. And so that was like an initial like, oh God, this is going to be a very different experience than my last three deployments, isn't it? And so like it's a weird confluence of like all my dreams are coming true of the job I want to do, but like this very strange environment in which I'm doing it that's not going to necessarily end up being good for my mental health, like. And so my commander, who was like, you know, this ranger dude, he'd been a ranger commander and like very tough, like infantry guy, he's also he was part of Mensa. He was like an actual genius, But he also like for him, he was like this deployment is boring because like he's used to being in Iraq and like going out on raids every night and coming back with 16 bodies on the top of your truck and being like, all right, we fucking killed the enemy.
Right.
And it's like, well, it's not exactly the environment that we're in right now. On the other hand, like it's still war and it's still dangerous. So there's a, on the one hand, the senior leadership of the Taliban, so the guys that are all in Pakistan, are ordering and begging their fighters to like attack the coalition more. Like we need more attacks on the coalition. But on the ground, there are all these fighters that are like, here's the
Yeah.
thing. I could attack the coalition and get like probably like wounded or killed, or I can like hop over to Helmand province that has no coalition and run wild, just like kicking the ass of the Afghan forces.
Right.
And so for the first couple months, I would see this like push and pull between like elements of the Taliban being like, you guys need to get into Kandahar and attack those guys, and then being like, or maybe not, because we're like really fucking them up throughout all of Helmand. So
Right.
like it was I'm and as far as a lot of people in Kandahar are concerned, they're like, look, we're not being attacked right now, so who cares? So we get rocketed once in a while, but that was it. And they weren't even very good because most of the like good rocketers had been killed or arrested or in Helmand. So they're like all the like really bad fighters are just in Kandahar not doing anything. But as time creeps on this deployment, they're like finally getting more and more people. More guys are getting released from prison. More guys are coming back from Helmand to like come home. And like maybe we'll do an attack or two while we're home before we go back, And so like the violence starts to escalate really slowly. And so all these soldiers that I'm with are like really struggling to figure out where they are in the world. Like the majority of our lieutenants, I guess another like the battalion I was in had been left behind on their last deployment. So the last time the brigade left, like 2 years before, the whole battalion had been left behind. So all of our lieutenants like stayed as long as they could to try and get on this deployment because all their friends had deployed and gone to war and seen what they wanted to see and done what they wanted to do and learned like, do I love this? Do I hate this? What am I made of? Did I, all the things that you want answered by like tough life experiences. And they still hadn't, they'd still just been sitting at home. So they're here, but it doesn't feel like they're fighting that much, but there's still violence, but they don't know. And so it's like there's a lot of frustration within the unit. One fun thing was that we were a combined multinational unit. So half of our battalion was my unit from home. The other half was a Romanian infantry unit. And so we like blended in so that our staff was joint US and Romanian. Our
Mhm.
companies were still distinct. So like half of our patrols were like an American company and half were like a Romanian infantry company. But like my shop was me, my lieutenant, my sergeant, my staff sergeant, and then like all our random civilians, and then two Romanian captains, a Romanian lieutenant, like some random Romanian soldiers that didn't even come over to our shop that often.
What do
And
you mean
so
by
like the intel, the room basically where we're doing all of the like intel work. And so they did kind of the same thing that we did. They pushed all their soldiers down a level. So I like only saw them once in a while. But it's like for all of our meetings, I'm like sitting there with a joint US Romanian group talking about like, okay, we have 2 American patrols going here, we have 3 Romanian patrols going here, and like doing all this work as like a combined, it's like a family, a step family that's gotten, very different cultures, but to like learning to work together. And it was awesome. They were great. I love the Romanians. They were a little different, like because they have a very different cultural history. So like a bunch of them were really psyched because Romania had just joined NATO. Like they were like officially NATO members and they were really excited. But a couple of them like really, really missed communism. So it would
whoa?
be like, like a bunch of them being like, yeah, NATO. And then like 2 of them being like, yeah, but it's like not as cool as when like the Soviets thought we were cool and we were communists. Wasn't that dope, you guys? And it's like so funny how different it was. We're like, we had one of my contractors was a lesbian. And so like my Romanians were like really shitty about that. And she was not good at her job, which had nothing to do with her sexual orientation. But she would leave and they'd be like, well, of course she's bad at her job because, she's crazy. Like, what do you mean she's crazy? Like, well, she likes women. So, she's like a crazy person. I'm like, okay, no, that's not what's happening here. She's not good at her job. That has nothing to do with her liking women. They'd be like, agree to disagree. Like we'd have these like cultural friction points and they had shorter deployments. So we ended up over the course of this 9 months, we had 3 different Romanian battalions that we had. So the first one was kind of on its way out. They were teaching us Romanian, which was fun, but they taught us like some one of our favorite phrases they taught us was to say, hey, what's up, scumbags? Like, che fach, like, how's it going? But the new unit came in and we didn't realize that the word for scumbag in Romanian has like a very negative connotation. It would be like very seriously being like, hey, what's up, you guy who literally fucks your mom? Like a really mean insult. And so they would come in and we'd be like, hey, what's up, you scumbags? And they were like offended. Be like, wait, we're this is what they taught us. And then we describe like they taught us it was like, what's up, scumbag? And they're like, what is scumbag? Like, like a really slimy guy who like tries to get away with bad stuff and is like maybe not good at what they do, or maybe is always trying to like trick you. And they're like, yeah, exactly. Like scumbag. Like, why would you call someone that? Like, okay, it doesn't mean as bad for us, I guess. So they taught us how to say "What's up, nerds?" instead, and that was way better. So if I come in, I'm like, "Che faci, tocilar?" They're like, "Yeah, what's up, nerds?" And that was really fun. They would have like a Romanian phrase of the week that we'd all learn, and I ended up by the end I could speak some Romanian, but my accent was phenomenal. They were creeped out when I would speak Romanian. They're like, "Are you Romanian?" Like, no, my vocabulary is so small, but I can mimic exactly how you sound. So like that was a blast, and going out on patrol with them was wild because like a lot of times I would be the only American with them, and so it's just like you've got those slight cultural differences that are like just a little wonky. And you're like, we're like out in the middle of like an active combat zone with people who like you trust and they trust, but also like you have to remember from time to time, you might be assuming things that aren't 100%
Yeah,
shared. Or
yeah.
like before patrols, I thought this was hilarious. They were Orthodox as just
Mhm.
a general rule. And so before patrols, some of the American patrols would have groups of guys that would like pray, but there wasn't any kind of like group thing about it. The Romanians, the whole patrol would circle up in arms, and their like priest would do an Orthodox prayer, and he would
Whoa,
dip like branches into holy water and fling it on you. And then
whoa,
after that, they would break off and individually they would buy like anointing oil and they would like anoint each other with the cross on their foreheads with oil. And so
whoa.
like a couple times dudes would come up to me like, I'm gonna anoint you with oil. I'd be like, you know what? I would love to not be anointed with Romanian Orthodox holy oil right now. But thank you. I appreciate feeling like I'm on the team, but maybe not. Like, but it was wild. Um, but yeah, the
Dang.
deployment started to really. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
How long was that deployment?
9 months. So I left
Same as
end of June, and I got back in March.
okay. So and okay. What and how many deployments were there prior to Arizona?
3.
Three. Okay, is this the last one?
Yeah. So in like September, I guess, the violence started to really escalate. So that's when we started getting hit with like suicide bombers. And we were real lucky, especially at the beginning. Uh, our first one was like a Romanian patrol was coming back, and a guy on a little moto, like the little Chinese moto, is like super prolific over there. It's like just these little Chinese manufactured dirt bikes, basically. And a guy with a vest was driving down. So they're driving north along the highway towards the base. He's driving south and he got between trucks. I don't know why. We think what happened. It's hard to tell. Like, sometimes you talk to everyone and you get different accounts. Some of them thought that he pulled out a pistol and just kind of like shot at the truck first and then exploded, and some think he just tried to aim for it and detonated prematurely, but he blew up between trucks. So no one was injured at all, but it was like, oh shit, like that's pretty significant. Like they're really trying to make something happen here.
Yeah.
Um, and then it's been so long now. I used to have the dates memorized. I knew exactly when each thing happened, but it was maybe a week later, along the same highway, but north of the base. Another Romanian patrol was at a basically across our AO, like the area of operations. We had all these little Afghan police checkpoints. So they were like the main security. And then we would just patrol around. And a lot of our patrols, you just drive around the AO for a while and then meet up with the, Afghan police, like, how's it going? Anything we can do to help? Stuff like that. So most patrols I went on were like, hey, we're gonna go talk to this police chief. Do you want to come along since you know all the intel stuff? And so the patrol was meeting with one of these checkpoints, and as they're meeting, they see a sedan is driving through. They set up a little perimeter, so they string wire across it, and this car pulls off the highway and starts driving towards them. The the Romanian dudes on the roof just start lighting up the truck or lighting up the car. What we think happened was they killed him, but the car bomb was on like a timer, and
Mhm.
so he like crashes into the wall, and then like 2 minutes later it detonates. So that one wounded a number of people. The lieutenant,
And they don't like clear away from that car as
well,
possible.
they did initially. Everyone like takes cover, but then like you're trying to figure out, was this just a guy who like doesn't like the coalition that's just driving into him? Was this a bomb that didn't go off?
Right.
You don't know necessarily how it's going to end, right? You don't
Yeah.
know if this is a car bomb or not. And so by the time it exploded, people were still a little bit protected, but then the overpressure is what really got most people. And then the lieutenant got shrapnel in his chest and shrapnel in his arm. The
Were they
thing
like
that I
going to like closer to the car to investigate the car?
Not really. It was just like one of those things that they hadn't figured out kind of what to do with it yet, and it blew up, and we're like, oh well, shit. But The lieutenant didn't realize that he had a sucking chest wound. He just thought his arm was fucked up. And so we send like a reaction force to pick up the casualties. And they're like, all right, let's take the lieutenant. And he's like, no, I'm not going to leave the rest of my guys. And so they're like, okay, I guess. So they evacuate all the other wounded guys. And it's not until the rest of the patrol got back that they realized, oh, the lieutenant is like in serious danger and he has a sucking chest wound. And my commander is telling us about all this. And he's like, and that's why we don't let lieutenants make decisions about this. Next time, evacuate all of them. Fuck it. Like,
Fuck,
yeah,
man.
that's fair. This guy, they started calling him Die Hard. So six is the call sign for like the commander or something. So he was the platoon leader, and they started calling him Die Hard Six because he gets evacuated to Germany, heals up his chest, he comes back. The first patrol he has back, they're out, they're walking around a village, and the Taliban dudes had, there's not like a mental health program in Afghanistan.
Oh no.
And so they take the local like mentally handicapped guy and they give him a like barber straight razor. They're like, hey, like run at the next patrol you see and try and kill him.
What the fuck?
Because for them, this is a huge win. It like
Right.
what they're envisioning is this guy's going to get killed, and then they can talk to the village about how shitty the coalition is for killing this simple, mentally
Right.
handicapped guy. So he comes sprinting towards the platoon leader who just got back from getting, healed up in Germany. Instead of shooting him, he roundhouse kicks him and like wrestles him to the ground and disarms him, realizes he's mentally handicapped, gets together with like the village elders and was like, I think they tried to get your guy to like get killed. So like this guy can't get away. And then another patrol, his same platoon got hit by another IED. And so it's just like this guy can't get away from the violence.
Whoa.
Meanwhile, every time I go out, everyone's perfectly safe. Every time a rocket is landing, it's outside of an 800-meter radius of me. It's like you couldn't pay them to like kill me. But now I'm getting increasingly anxious and increasingly symptomatic of what we would realize as PTSD because I am seeing how violent everything is both within our AO and outside. So
Yeah.
I'm reading hundreds and hundreds of reports about this district center just got taken over by the Taliban. This checkpoint just got all beheaded by the Taliban. This group of civilians just got massacred. I'm in communication with our hospital because in addition to the like literal intelligence side of it, I was also the like security person for the base. So when people had to get evacuated to the base, that's like special forces guys, that's Afghan people. They needed a way to like blast through the security gates really fast. And so I'm in communication with all them. So I'm seeing how many casualties are coming to our hospital. The rest of the soldiers aren't really seeing that. They're just like going out on patrol. Once in a while, like we hit a couple IEDs that weren't that bad. Like we found one that like most of the ones that we were hitting were ones that were meant for Afghans. So they'd be like light enough that it would, if you were driving in a Toyota Hilux, it would shred
Right.
your Hilux. But
Right.
if you're driving in a fucking up armored, huge, like armored vehicle, it doesn't do anything to it. Like, oh, actually, it's convenient. I'm right here. Um, so like one of our trucks, this is shrapnel from one of the IEDs that hit our truck. This is a huge ball bearing, but it just like stuck into a seam between armor plates and it was fine, you know,
Whoa.
because like it's a huge up armored vehicle. If this comes at your Toyota
Right.
and along with another 200 of them, you're in
Right.
trouble. But in our vehicles, it was okay. And so, like, I am just paranoid that I'm going to be responsible for our guys getting killed. That's an exaggeration only because, like, I'm not the one trying to kill them, the enemy is. But
Right.
I feel like I am the sole person trying to like keep everyone safe. Not the sole person. There were a couple other guys that I was working with that were really, really good who were helpful too. Like we would go to a security meeting with the Afghans, I think every 2 weeks. And so we're doing this not on our base. And so every time we went in, me and my buddy Travis would like clear the building we were going in because a major, major threat at the time is Afghans attacking coalition, like Afghan uniformed soldiers. They call it a green on
Whoa.
blue attack, like an
That's what's called
Afghan
green on blue.
soldier, because green, like blue is like your force, red is the enemy force,
Right,
white is like civilians, and then green is like your partners.
right.
So, like having partners, the first attack that happened on our whole deployment wasn't to us, it was to a special forces team. And that was like an Afghan special forces dude just lit up their whole bus when they were coming back from a range. And it's
Whoa.
like, and so we would clear the building, and I've got our operations officer would make fun of us. Like, what are you doing? Like checking to make sure no one's hiding under the table. Like, yes, I am.
That's
So that
exactly what
you
I'm
don't get
doing.
fucking killed, you idiot. Like it was wild because there was such a dissonance between like senior people feeling like, well, nothing's going to happen to me, and like my generation, like all these captains who have just come from like intense combat deployments where they're like platoon leaders and they're like in it. We're like aware of how dangerous this is. Our leaders had all like, yeah, I was in Iraq 10 years ago, but like they're starting to lose the memory of what that's like and assume like, well, I was in Iraq and that was probably tougher than Afghanistan. Like, this is gonna be fine. It's like, no, boo, like they want to kill you too, man. And
Hmm.
so I was getting these like really stressful mixed signals from my command because it felt like, oh, nothing's gonna happen. And so don't even worry about it. And I'm like, I'm fucking worried about it. And so that was a major contributing factor to my mounting high levels of stress and anxiety about it. um, it was getting really, really bad. I had some like trouble with some of our contractors. One of them during a that first BBIT attack where the motorcycle blew up. His whole job was just to like, if we had any kind of sensor to be monitoring what the sensor, so like a camera anywhere. So if you have a plane flying overhead watching over everyone, he's supposed to be the one telling them what to keep their camera on, right?
Okay.
And he usually got up and left. We were like, hey man, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I was gonna get a snack. We're like, we're kind of in
Whoa.
the middle of something, man. He's like, oh, we are? Like he didn't notice that like one of our patrols had just been blown up. And so like we had to fire him.
He's a
Um,
contractor, right?
yeah.
So yeah,
And
it's like this job thing.
he was like a retired Marine colonel. I was like, what is your deal, man? Like, didn't at
Yeah,
some point in your time in the Marines you feel some kind of responsibility to the people you were fighting with? Like, what's happening? It
yeah.
was very disorienting. And then one of my other contractors was her contract kept getting renegotiated because as we were drawing down, they kept saying like, well, do we really need this contract to be fulfilled or do we downsize it and send her home? And so she was really nervous about keeping her job. And so I kept writing these like memos being like, we really need this person, like please keep her in country, we really need this. But like her wife had left her, and like there was a lot of personal stuff in her life going badly, and I could tell like she used a lot of soft power with people, like I'm your buddy, so like you should be my friend. I was like, I don't care for buddies, I just want you to do your job. And I
Right.
could tell that was making her really nervous. And
Hmm.
so no matter how much I was defending her, I could tell like things were going well with her. And so like the lieutenants are all upset because they don't know where they are in this world. The senior leaders don't really care what's going on because they're like, I was really cool in Iraq and this is beneath me. And I'm nervous because I'm afraid we're going to lose people soon because we've been really lucky every attack so far. So I'm like a mess by November. The first week of December, well, I guess December 8th to 9th, me and my best friend are we had dinner and we're about to walk back, and we decided, hey, let's like swing by the company areas and check on how they're doing and then head back to the office. The incoming fire alarm goes off, and so we like get down. We don't really hear anything, so we get to a bunker. We don't hear much, so we're listening for explosions, because usually if a rocket comes in, you can hear where that lands, because if it's anywhere on the base, you're going to hear it and you can tell kind of how close or far it is. But we don't really hear anything, so we're like, all right, let's just run over to the companies. So we sprint down to the companies. The incoming alarms are still going off like every couple minutes, and our main like patrol company has like a little mini operation center set up. So they have like, screens with everything that's going on. They have computers where you can get on all of your systems to like, the chat rooms you use and the like email communication, everything you're doing. They have radios, they've got all that set up. So I go in, and my little, God bless her, my favorite analyst, she was so good. She was like their company intelligence person I pushed down to them, but she had like gone in for the night. So at this point, she's just kind of like hiding in a bunker somewhere. And so I log on to all her computers with my information. So like I'm basically up and ready to go, but I'm still a kilometer away from where my actual office is. What we find out is happening is, for our airfield, think of like a P-shaped base, right? And then the like bulb of the P is where the airstrip is.
Okay.
And then there's like, the rest of the units are around that. In the like pocket of that P is like a civilian area. So there's a bazaar, there's some apartments that the Russians had built in the 80s. There's a school that was under construction. And then next to that, kind of on the other side of the pocket, is the
One
Afghan.
second.
Yep.
Uh,
Since
Do you need to go?
no, 1 second.
sauna.
Oh, dope.
I was just looking around. Yeah.
I'll check it out. Yeah. After you off the phone, I'll check it out. Cool. Thanks, Tom. Nice. Okay. P shape, and for that's what the airstrip is on the bulb of the P.
Yep. And so you've got like a coalition base, a civilian like village area, and then an Afghan army base. What had happened was, in that in between civilian area, there were probably 12 suicide attackers that had started to like take it over. So we have a team of guys in the school, a team of guys in the apartments, and a team of guys at the bazaar.
Okay.
The guys in the school are shooting RPGs over our wall, and then the other guys are just slaughtering people indiscriminately. So like the bazaar is just literally on fire, and they're just mowing down men, women, and children. And so this is at like
outside the base.
Yeah, it's in the in-between area.
Okay.
So this is where it's shitty, is that if we're not getting directly attacked, we're not allowed to act without the Afghans asking for help. And so we're just taking indirect RPGs, which I guess they were doing just to keep us kind of occupied. And our senior commander, so above my battalion, like the general in charge of the whole base, contacts the Afghans. He says, hey, do you want us to get involved? We're ready to go. We've got teams ready. I'm like in our company that's the best prepared to attack. And these guys are like, finally, let's do it. They're like getting in trucks. They're like loading weapons. They're ready to go. And then the Afghans are like, no, we're handling it.
Whoa.
So instead, for the next 27 hours,
what?
I'm watching just civilians getting slaughtered, things being shot everywhere. The Afghans would kind of get like the worst. after about 8 hours.
You're
So
watching on camera
yeah,
or like
so we got cameras everywhere at this point because they're so close to the base. We got all these
right?
like base monitoring cameras. So like at about 3 in the morning, Adam and I decide let's try and bound back to like our actual headquarters. Like things have maybe died down enough. So we are like running in the dark through this base. There's tracer fire coming in around us. Like there's just kind of chaos everywhere. We get back, and from then on, it's, I mean, the whole time, it's like game on, trying to figure out who's doing this. Is this going to get bigger? Is this going to spread? Like, what's going on? And so I'm working with all the intelligence people to try and trace the origins. We're figuring out kind of where these people came from, who's funding it. I'm finding out all of that, but that doesn't really help us fix it if we're not allowed to fix it. I would watch, and the Afghans were centered around this school, right? They're surrounded the school. It's made of stone. And so you'd see them just like pouring machine gun fire onto it. There's like chips and smoke just coming off the school as they're like wrecking the stone coming off the school. They'd report in, all right, we've cleared the school. But they hadn't sent anyone into it. And so then like two more Taliban dudes would pop out of it, shoot another RPG, and duck back in. So then they'd like shoot at the school again. I'm like, guys, that's not doing it. You know, like they took a couple people hostage in the apartments because there were a lot of like Afghan officer families in the apartments. So they took a couple of them hostage. And by the morning, they're starting to call the media and say, like, hey, we've like attacked the middle of this base. We're doing an amazing job and we're going to be here for weeks. Like, we're going to be here forever. I think there were also, it was a real hazy, it's gonna be hard to explain. I was tracking a lot of different like enemy cells, a lot of networks. So they're like attack networks and support networks. And one of the like major networks we're tracking is like financial support. And so they were using a lot of the contracts on the base to funnel money out to the Taliban. So if we have a contract to deliver water, right, then, you know, say 3 times a week, this dude has a semi truck and he drives bottled water onto the base, drops off bottled water at the water points all over the base, and drives off. Well, if he can not drop off as much water, then they can sell that water on the open market for, you know, funding that goes to the Taliban. Or if I've got a job, you know, doing deconstruction, so I'm taking down buildings that have been built over the last 15 years of the war, and I'm getting paid for that, then maybe half of that money I'm directing to the Taliban, right? So there's all this like racket money from the black market. And so I'm tracking a lot of these guys who are like either working on the base or are Afghan soldiers who are also involved in these like black market funding operations. Well, they're also connected to the weapons smuggling people who are also connected to this attack because they've been smuggling weapons in for weeks. So now suddenly we've got guys who are technically like Afghan army who I think are actually fighting the Afghan army on behalf of this attack that's happening. It was like just
Whoa,
chaos.
dude.
By the time it's all done, it's unclear how many dead bodies, dead enemy there were. We know there are at least 12. I think there were probably 16 to 20, but a bunch of them were in Afghan army uniforms. So how do you count that? If you just walk up and there are a bunch of dead bodies and a bunch of them are Afghan army, who's to say which of them are the attackers and which of them are the casualties?
Right.
They killed and wounded hundreds of people. I think 110 civilians had been killed over the course of that attack. A bunch of Afghan soldiers are killed and wounded. And it just felt like a nightmare for me. Like, I can't take responsibility for it. I didn't plan and conduct that attack. but I felt like I had failed for not anticipating it.
Mm-hmm.
That's an unfair thing. That's an unfair standard to hold myself to. Like, I can't prevent everything. And the phrase that is very common in the army is the enemy always has a vote. You can do all of your preparation, but they've got a vote too.
Right.
They're trying to do all of their preparation too. And it was that was a real turning point for me. Like, that was a devastating thing for me. And it was also heartbreaking because then, same like the operations officer we didn't take any coalition casualties. And he just felt like, I guess I can ignore this attack happened. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about,
Is
man?
this your
Like,
boss essentially, or what?
kind of. So the S2 is the intelligence section. So I'm the head of the S2. The S3 is the operations section. So that's planning all of the like missions. He's the major that's in charge of the S3, right?
Okay.
So we're on staff together. He's the senior person on the staff, but we're also like, I work with him every day to plan missions and plan operations and do all this stuff. And like, we just were seeing this war so differently. Like, I can't describe it. Was so, I can't put it into words. My commander was at least like, yeah, that was bad. We don't want that to happen. So there was a plan that I uncovered a couple weeks later of them being like, that went perfect, let's do it again. And that time we stopped it, because I was like, now imagine you have 15 cups in front of you, and under each one is a piece of paper. Some of those pieces of paper say nothing. Some of them say fuck you. Some of them say, I don't know what's going on. Under any of those 15, it could say fuck you, right? And my job is to figure out which of those 15 cups is going to be the most insulting, you know? Well, if you turn over one of those cups and it says fuck you, well, now to keep an eye on that cup, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now I've got a better idea of what of these threat streams to monitor. So the next time they want it to happen, we did stop it from happening. And that's
Right.
probably the greatest thing I've ever done in my whole life,
Right.
other than like help make my children. But from that point on, that deployment was just every single day me trying to kill myself to stop that from happening again. So I'm
Right.
up until 2 in the morning every day. I'm reading every possible report I can read, every possible source of intelligence, talking to anyone I can, and just trying to track every possible threat. I made friends with another person, another intelligence captain. Her job was, she was at the level like where they had advisors and more senior intelligence people. But she also was like really anxious about this happening again. So, so this is like December, right? We've started to make really good friends. We've started to really uncover a lot of what's going on in the area. It's going really well. On New Year's, she goes to another base. That's, on the one hand, I would go to that base once a week to like coordinate like more senior intelligence stuff. But they also had, you know, it wasn't an army base. It was more of a like higher level kind of joint situation. And so they wanted people to come and like, if you want to hang out, like they had alcohol there and they had like way fewer rules and way less people, and then like a shitload more Afghans around. So she went up to this base for like New Year's. I was like, I don't celebrate holidays over here. Like, I'm not have fun, but whatever. So she comes back and she's like, I need to talk to you, but only if you have to promise not to do anything. I was like, okay, I don't know what that means, but all right. And so she tells me that while she was up there, they're like having a good time. She's hanging out with these American special forces guys, and one of them rapes her. And I'm like, what the fuck is happening in this goddamn country? Like, not only are we like
That
watching
just
civilians,
happened that night.
it happened. Yeah, she's talking to me like 2 days later.
Fuck.
And I'm like, so not only are we like having trouble convincing people that this is a war, even though we're like watching people getting slaughtered every day, now like the people I'm trusting the most and working with the most can't even trust other US soldiers because they're taking advantage of her. And I was like just devastated by this whole thing. At the same time, my contractor, who had been really nervous about her job, she asked me if she could have Christmas off. She said the attack had been really stressful on her. She needed some time to like, I don't know, recover, I guess. And I told her, I will give you time off. I can't give you Christmas because I can't give Christmas as a special day to everyone. So I'll let you take any other day. And so she said, well, then I'm going to complain that you're harassing me until they fire you. I was like, well, that's not great. So that's what she did. So then now I'm under investigation for harassing people at work. Attacks are escalating. My friend has just been raped. Like, so now I'm just a disaster. I'm like, everything is piled up on me. My hands were just constantly shaking. I I was a mess, man. I was a fucking mess.
How many months in, or how many months are left in the deployment at this point?
This is like January, so it feels like we're close to the end. We got like 2 months left. Got to get through January, February, and half of March.
Was that the first sexual assault you had heard of in the army, or is it in your?
No,
Oh,
but it was probably the most personal. Like the first time someone came to me and said, like, "This just happened. Don't tell anyone. Don't take any action." But also, like, I'm terrified all the time. And like, so she's walking to her like living quarters with her pistol, like with a round loaded, like ready to kill someone if she gets approached by someone at night now. And like, so
including
we start
a U.S. service member potentially.
absolutely. Um, I'm working until like 2 a.m. And so this is when I remember thinking to myself, like, this is probably a sign that you're not doing well. I'm walking back, it's 2 in the morning, it's freezing, it's like 30 degrees. I can feel my hands like freezing to my rifle. And I was like whisper singing, you know, um, the Beatles album Abbey Road. It's
Mhm.
probably my favorite just album of all time. But they've got the song Carry That Weight towards
Mhm.
the end. And I'm just singing to myself, carry that weight, carry that weight a long
Fucking
time. And I
dude.
was like, this is probably not great. Like, this is probably a signal that your mental health is not good.
Ugh.
I start helping my friend if she's like done with her work at midnight to 2, I'm walking her back to her quarters.
Did she ever do
Well,
anything? Not to get in her personal business, but like she didn't report it or anything.
nope. We saw him at the same time once because we had an intel meeting at that base, and she was nervous about the meeting, and so I was like keeping an eye on her. And as we got off the helicopter, she like taps me and was like, "That's the guy." I was just like, "Fuck." Well, all right. Well, I'm going to keep an eye on that, even though this
Is
is
that
like a middle
like
of
such a common thing in the military that it's like not even reported?
the army definitely has a problem with sexual assault. It's trying really, really hard to fight that. Like every unit has a sexual assault like representative to help train you, like how to make a restricted report, how to make an unrestricted report, how to get medical attention, how to get it investigated if you want or keep it private if you want. We have training on it every at least every year, maybe every 6 months. Like the army's trying, but it's also so socially against the grain. Like And it's also such a pervasive, like, massive male environment.
Yeah, you got a
If
bunch of aggro dudes and like a very small number of chicks.
if women are complaining that they're getting harassed, like, they're probably just being whiny. You're like, or maybe you're just being a really shitty human being. Like, no, it can't be that because I'm awesome. Like, it's just an environment that's really, really bad. And I ended up, the reason I started getting mental health help was we had a period when we got home where in 2 weeks, the brigade had 12 sexual harassment or sexual assault instances that had been reported. And like, the reaction to it on the staff was like, oh man, that's annoying. We got to do retraining. And I was like, it's not annoying. This is heartbreak. This is shocking. We should be horrified and trying to muster the whole 4,000 unit brigade to say, like, what the fuck is happening? And I was so horrified by the response that I was like, I have to talk to someone because this is too overwhelming. Like, this is like 6 months after that my friend had been raped, and like, I just couldn't handle it anymore. But that's after we got back.
Yeah, some fucking special forces dude just casually raping some chick on New Year's Eve. I mean, how many chicks has that guy raped?
Right? You know what I mean? Like,
That's insane.
so obviously I wasn't going to violate her trust by like trying to go behind her back and like help out, but it would like, that really, really fucked with me. And then we also started getting attacked all the time. So they had released a bunch of guys from prison who were like high level good Taliban fighters, like guys that had been arrested in like 2010, 2011, who were like high quality. So we start getting rocketed with like a bunch of rockets at once that are all hitting like on the base really, really good. Or like one of our patrols. So a really like high level technique that they could use. So we got these huge trucks, right? And a lot of them have mine rollers. So in front of it is almost like, it looks almost like farming equipment. This big, heavy sled, basically, so that if you hit a pressure plate, it blows up before the vehicle gets there. It's like it blows up this sled, but doesn't actually hit the truck. So they they find an IED. It has a pressure plate here, and a pressure plate here, and a pressure plate here. So the only vehicle that could possibly detonate it is one of our vehicles, measured exactly so that the front left wheel, the rear right wheel, and the rear left wheel all hit the pressure plates at the same time, so that in circuit they all connect and explode. Underneath is like 600 pounds of homemade explosive. So that'll blow up anything. Like, so instead of like before where you hit one pressure plate, you get a canister of these and it shreds your, Hilux. This is like, we're trying to kill a coalition truck. And then we found another one, again, 300 pounds of homemade explosive under like a drainage culvert. And then the command wire to this is a command one. So that means there has to be a dude present that's like waiting for you. And where the wire ended was a cache of a heavy machine gun, other machine guns, and grenades. Like, they are ready to go to ambush. And we just happened to find it before they got the chance. So like, they are really, really targeting us now. And I'm like, I can't get a person to listen. Like, commander doesn't give a shit. The senior commander doesn't care. We had a new general come in command, and he had been in Iraq once in 2004 as a National Guard dude. So he has like no idea what we're doing. And so the base is getting rocketed like all the time. And he's like, I don't know what to do. Like, why didn't we know this was going to happen? And I like flip him back to intelligence reports I've been briefing him on every week. I'm like, I told you this was going to happen 3 days ago. Before that, I told you that was going to happen. Like, it's not that I can't see it coming. It's happening, and you're just not listening, man. And so, like, the next worst one, this is at the end of January.
What do you think that is? Do you think at that point the war is just dragging on so long that it's just become like This is like an appointment for these guys that are kind of removed from the everyday violence of it, and it's not really
I,
sure what the mission is anymore, or when it's going to end, or what the fuck we're kind of.
I think it's a game of hot potato. If you get to hold the potato, and then as long as it didn't, burn you by the time, the music ended, if you're not holding the hot potato, you're good. So like, well, I have to be over here to advance my career, but I don't want to like be the alarmist that says it's not going well, you know, our policy isn't working, the war is bad and the Taliban is doing well. Like, if you're reporting things as they are, you might get a political blowback at that level. People are going
Right,
to be like, oh, well, you're not a team player. Oh, you don't believe in our policy? What's wrong
right.
with you? So as a captain, I can say, this is not going well. But as a general, they're like afraid to say it. And as a colonel who wants to get promoted to general, they're afraid to say it. Like, so there are all these career incentives for them to be like,
The career paths are set. It's just
yeah,
a matter of time passing, essentially.
right. So if they can white knuckle it and nothing too bad can happen,
Right, and
then
avoid disaster, then they're
not
gonna
my
get
fault.
right, right.
So I wasn't the one in 2021 when it fell, so it's not my fault. Like,
Would
well,
they get promoted to? Would these promotions be occurring at the same rate if there was no war going on at that level? Like now, like are dudes in the same positions on
if
the
you can
same
say
promotion trajectory timeline, even though there's not nearly as much active conflict going on, or does it expedite the
no,
process?
because if you say I successfully led a unit in a combat deployment and nothing bad happened, you look better than everyone that's like, well, we trained really well and we did a really good job on that. Like, well, so what? I was the one in combat. And
Right,
so you look better, even if all you were doing was being like, come on, don't fuck it up.
right,
Come on, don't fuck it up. Ignore how bad it is.
right.
So
Kind of
I
like
was in
hunkering down, covering your ears, waiting out your time.
look, that's how it felt to me. I'm
Right.
sure there's another side to the story, but that's really how it felt to me. So I'm in a meeting. It's like our regular Friday intel meeting at the higher headquarters. The rocket alarm goes off. So I just leave the meeting and go straight to someone else's computer and log on. I can see, where the rockets came from and that we're going to send out a patrol to check it out. A lot of times when that would happen, especially early on, we would find rockets at the firing point because if you have a shitty guy doing it, he'll daisy chain 3 or 6 rockets together, but he doesn't know how to do it very well. So the first one will launch and that'll rip all the wires off. And so the other ones will just sit there. And so you patrol up there, you recover all those rockets and you blow them up so they can't be used again. And you want to investigate to see, like, is there any other intel we can gain from where this firing point happened? But I've been saying for weeks, because I know what the Taliban senior leadership is saying. I know that we've got more talented dudes in the area now. Hey, they have figured out that we're going to go to all these firing points. They're going to start putting IEDs at the firing points. So like, they want to hit us when we investigate. So I don't know when it's going to happen, but it's going to happen soon. Keep your eyes open. So this happens. I call the battle bridge. I say like, hey guys, like, are you telling the patrol to look out for IEDs? Because I'm telling you, it's going to happen. Like, yeah, we'll tell them. I write in the like shared battle chat window, make sure you look out for IEDs. Like, we're waiting for that to happen. It's going to happen sometime soon. Everybody watch out. I've done everything I can do to like communicate to watch out for this. So I go back to my office. I'm writing my nightly report. It's 2 or 3 hours later, so about enough time for patrol to get spun up and head out there. But it's like, a rocket's maximum range is like 8 kilometers, and this one they fired like 3 kilometers away. That's not that far away. Our windows are open now because it's getting warm again. And as I'm typing my report, I hear an IED detonate on the patrol. I can feel it detonate in the office. I'm
Whoa.
like, oh fuck. So I sprint out of the office as I'm running down the hallway. One of my contractors is coming in, one of my good ones. I had one or two really good ones. and he'd been out smoking when it happened. And the only thing he said to me as I passed, he goes, "That one felt big, man." So I like run down, and dude, again, we got so lucky. We had an attached EOD team. Or EOD is like the bomb squad, basically, explosive ordnance guys. It's like the Hurt Lockers about EOD
Yeah.
guys.
Hmm.
Also, Army people hate that movie. That's a dumb movie. Anyway, so the EOD team that was on the patrol to investigate is the one that hit the IED. It was exactly what we thought it would be. It's a pressure plate right on the one way to get to the firing point. But all it really did was the EOD vehicles are like super heavy and super, like they're all super V-shaped to dissipate any of the blast, and like they're pretty cool. I went on patrol in one once, and it was like so bouncy because there were so many like
Hmm.
springs and things to like keep it
Hmm.
from just, blowing you up. So it blew off the little like step ladder to get into the truck, and all the guys got like TBI, but no one got like catastrophically injured. It was just like pretty light wounds, but it was like devastating because it was like, I
Dude, what a
swear to
crazy
God.
fucking job those guys have.
And so then, like an hour later, I get
Wow.
a private like message chat from the brigade commander who's like, "Hey, like, why didn't they know they were going to get hit?" And I was like, "Sir, like, I don't know what to tell you, man. Like, I told everyone that this was going to happen. What do you want from me?" Like, I messaged everyone, I called everyone. We knew this was going to happen. So I don't know. What do you want from me, man? Are you still there? Shit. Oh, got you back.
My phone got too hot. I need technology.
See, that's not going to happen here because it's -5 degrees.
I know, right? Let's okay, so EOD gets hit.
Oh, did I lose you again? Oh, there you are. So yeah, my commander, the brigade commander, messages me. Is like, "Why didn't we know this was going to happen?" I'm like, "Dude, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I told everyone I could have told. We knew this was going to happen." And it just felt like, am I getting blamed for this shit? Like, I am screaming to these guys many times a week what's going to happen. Then it happens. Then they ask me why they didn't know it was going to happen. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. So I just spent the last parts of this deployment just so ready to die. Like, I was so suicidal by the end because I was just waiting for the other shoe to drop and for something to happen and for our guys to just get killed.
Suicide, like you're suicidal in the sense that like you wanted to die, or you
A
were just kind
hundred
of
percent.
okay.
No, I wanted it. I wanted it, man. Every time I was walking from my headquarters to the higher headquarters, I was praying that a rocket would come in because I was like, hey, I'm just walking alone. I'm walking through these areas that have all been deconstructed. It's not going to hurt anyone else. It's not going to damage anything. It's just going to kill me. Like, come on, bring it on. Do it. Every time
Well,
I'm out on patrol, I'm like, come on, just
did it?
hit me. Find a way to hit me.
Did
We
you
had,
not? Did you not
there was
recognize
this,
how little time you had left in the deployment, or you at that point like
I
what
didn't
was
care,
that?
man. I just needed it to be done. I just
Right.
needed it to be done. There was, because of some of the deconstruction that had happened, there was like a board that had been half uncovered. So what it looked like was, it looked like a pressure plate that you had uncovered. Like, if you had seen it off the base, you would have stopped. You would have like kept everyone around and interrogated it with like a robot. Like you'd have thought it was an IED. And I knew intellectually that it wasn't, but I fantasized that it was, and it was on my path every day. I passed it probably 4 to 6 times a day, and every time I would think about like, I could step on you and it would all be done. It would be so great. And I wouldn't, one, because I wanted to keep the fantasy going of like not ruining it for myself that it's just a fucking board, but
Right.
also being like, hey, if I don't step on it today, that means I'm doing fine. So I don't
Right.
have a problem. I don't need to talk to anybody. That must mean my mental health is fine. Spoiler alert, that's not what it means. My mental
Right.
health was not fine.
Right.
But I like daydreamed about just finally having it be done. Um,
Are you noticing this same sentiment amongst other people and no and or is anyone this isn't discussed?
no, especially like again because I'm so hyper aware of the larger war situation in a way that most of the people were willing to not be.
Got you.
Like your average infantry patrol wants to get in a fight, but they also assume that they're going to win the fight and that it's going to be pretty badass.
Right.
They're not 100% wrong either. Like it probably would have been great to have gotten in a gunfight for them. They would have been perfectly happy. But since that wasn't happening, they're less afraid in the same way that on my first deployment, I wasn't afraid of anything. I was like, let's let it happen, baby. Let's go. Just assuming I was going to win.
Mm-hmm.
The senior people are just ignoring the idea that anything bad is going to happen. Because if they can just get through to March, they're going to get promoted and everything's going to be great.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's like this very limited pool of like a handful of us that are like, you guys, it's going so bad. Like
Mm-hmm.
so much of Helmand, and at this point, northern Kandahar and Uruzgan, which is the province above that, are like falling to the Taliban routinely. We had Afghan soldiers taking their own medevac helicopters hostage, not letting the casualties on, and just being like, get us the fuck out of here, because if not, we're all going to die here. Like, people just mass abandoning the fight because they were like, we're going to get beheaded if we stay here. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and there's so few people that were willing to face that I just felt so alone and so used up. Like the army was going to be happy to use me because I was really, really good at my job. And I was getting so many people all the time being like, you're just such a great S2. We love having you here. You're doing a great job. And then the senior command being like, but also we don't give a fuck about you.
Mm-hmm.
And then right at the end, because now I'm walking my friend back to her living quarters at night because she's afraid she's going to kill someone. And my operations officer sees us walking and decides that must mean we're having an affair.
Mm-hmm.
And so he reports to my commander that I'm having an affair with this woman. And they try and give me, the army can give you a no contact order. That means you're not allowed to like talk to someone. And it's
Mm-hmm.
usually meant for uh
Like,
domestic violence.
oh
Like
shit, no.
if you live on base and you're in a fight with your wife, they can say you're in a no contact order. Go anywhere else. You can't talk to your wife until this is sorted out.
Mm-hmm.
And so he tries to give it to me, and I was like, "Fuck you, man! Like, there's no way you're giving me that. We have a professional like army relationship. She's the other intelligence officer. What am I supposed to do? Not talk to her about intelligence? Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's insane. There's nothing inappropriate about our relationship." He backed off, which was great. But I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, not only am I doing like the best work of my life and it's killing me and I want to kill myself, now also I'm getting attacked as like cheating on my wife, which I'm not doing just because I'm like walking the victim of sexual assault from within our own ranks back safely to her living area. Like, that was so fucked up. I just was like, I don't know what to do. So I'm like, I called my wife at some point and was like, because when the big like attack happened in December, I called her and was like, I don't know what this deployment is doing to me. Like I am getting real fucked up here.
Hmm.
And so she was awesome at being like, whatever happens, we'll figure it out. But I call her, I'm like, I don't know what it's gonna be like when I get home because I feel like I'm a mess. And like we have this baby that I barely know because I've been
Yeah.
gone for 9 months, and the 9 months before that, I was gone all the time. So it's
Mhm.
like she's been a single mom for almost a year and a half, and like I am a mess. I'm shaky and anxious and terrified all the time. And so I get home in the middle of March and I'm just like, I lost. So when I left for that deployment, I probably weighed 150 pounds.
Hmm.
I weighed 125 pounds when I got back, which like
Whoa.
I'm a little over 5'10". Like
Whoa.
that's not good, man.
Whoa.
I looked like a skeleton when I got back. And
No
I
one
was
said
just
anything to you in the at it when you were deployed?
I when I'm really stressed out, I have a really hard time eating. I just
Yeah,
really don't want to. I can't force myself to.
but no
So I
one
would
said
sit
anything to
there.
you. No one like said like 125 pounds. You must have been skinny as fuck while you're still out there.
Yeah, but at that point, so my third deployment, I also lost a shitload of weight, but I was also still in like a relatively good mood. And my wife had sent
Hmm.
me jars of Nutella. So I was just
Hmm.
eating Nutella straight from the jar to try and maintain some weight. And this time I like couldn't even do that. I couldn't do anything, man. I was just
Whoa.
like, well, keep putting me on patrol until I die, I guess. Let's keep this up. I don't know how I'm supposed to survive after this. So I get home and I'm like, well, I don't know who I am. I don't know. As soon as I got back, I was like, well, I have to get out of the army. Like, I can't keep doing this. I have to get out. I want to stay in long enough to go to one more duty station so that I can like recover my feelings for the army because I love the army.
Hmm.
But I was like, I can't,
One more
whatever
duty
this
station.
is,
What does that mean? Domestic?
that means move one more time to a different army base and like try and like patch up my relationship with the army enough to leave on good terms.
Right.
So like I moved from my battalion up to the brigade intelligence section, worked there for another year and a half.
Where's
It
this?
honestly went, this is still at Fort Drum. It went pretty well. My buddy, I had a buddy who I was also an intel guy. He was up in Kabul for that deployment, but like his wife left him on that deployment. We both were just like skeletons and both like these two captain skeletons at the brigade intelligence shop. And we were like, all right, let's try and recover together, man. And like, he's been one of my best buds ever since then, just like trying to get through it together now. And I found out at Fort Polk again. So the next January, went to Fort Polk, found out while I was there they were going to send me to Fort Meade in Maryland, and I was like, just act the thing, and it was like, all right, this is where I get out. This will be great. My wife got into grad school, so the army was going to send her to grad school. After that, she was going to go to West Point. So it was like, all right, you'll go to grad school. I'll finish my time in the army, and then that'll be it. And so that was like where it went from there. And
Were you
that's exactly what happened.
were you seeing a therapist at all the time? What was the mental health situation like in that first year?
So so I got home in March and I was like, everything's fine. I'm just going to ignore how bad everything is. In July, most of the like brigade leadership had changed over. So we had a new brigade commander. And that's when he was like, yeah, in the last 2 weeks, we've had 12 sexual assaults in our brigade. And I was like, what the fuck? So we had what
How
we call
big's a
this
brigade?
about 4,000 people.
Fucking A, man.
Dude, that's a lot. That is a lot. So we had a day where the only thing the whole
That's just
brigade
those that got
did
reported.
that yeah, that's just what was fucking reported, man. So we had a whole day where the whole thing was going to be retraining on the like sexual assault policies, like
Oh,
how
it's
to.
such like I mean I don't know what you do to that, but that's like so almost like insult. I don't know what it is. Like this guy who's out there raping chicks, like goes to training. He's like, oh fuck, my
Oh,
bad.
really? Well, here's what happened though.
I had no idea.
I'm with all these brigade staff officers who are like senior to me. It's like a bunch of majors and some lieutenant colonel guys, and then a bunch of our like young soldiers who are like, 22, specialists in the army. And the senior people start making fun of the training. Well, part of the training is they give you scenarios so you can identify like what are the problems, where could you have stepped in to be like, hey, you're being really inappropriate before it gets to like full on sexual assault or sexual harassment.
Mhm.
Well, they're making fun of it. These scenarios aren't imaginary. These are scenarios that have happened in the brigade. They've
Mhm.
sanitized the names and like units and everything. But I'm like, so I finally was like, no, 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 stop. I cannot stand here and listen to you and you and you, senior officers, making fun of this training because this shit happened here this week.
Mhm.
You're making fun of it, and that's making these soldiers make fun of it and not take it seriously. And that's how you get an environment where 12 of these fucking incidents happen and no one notices or gives a shit because of the way you are acting. So I'm like yelling at senior people at this point, and I like sit down. And I was like, I need to talk to someone. Like I need to do something about my mental health. Like I'm clearly fucked up. So as soon as it was done, I walked to my computer. I emailed our brigade. We had like a captain that was our mental health guy. He's like had a master's in social work, and he was supposed to like you could come to him if you had issues. I just emailed him. I was like, hey man, I need to see you. I don't know what else is wrong with me, but this is I just feel like something's wrong. So I started to see him, but like we probably only met like 6 times before I moved to Fort Meade. But when I got to Fort Meade, I walked in when I in processed. I just walked into the behavioral health clinic. I was like, I'm gonna need help. And they were like, usually you have like a referral. I was like, I don't care. Schedule me in for someone. Like I need help. And so there I got a psychiatrist and an actual really, really fucking great civilian therapist. And so we spent, see, I got there in the summer of 2017 and I left the Army November 2019. So like the next 2 and almost 6 months of time, just like doing heavy cognitive behavioral therapy, cognitive processing therapy, getting on medication for the first time. Medication was difficult because like I was having persistent nightmares, and so they put me on medication that like helped my nightmares, but I also gained. Let's see, if I was probably 135 or 140 by the time I got there, I got up to like 190 so fast. It was
Damn.
like I feel fucking enormous.
Was it
Like
like antipsychotic medication or like bipolar medication or something?
Um, I was on. I'm still on Cymbalta for like as an SSRI, I guess.
Uh-huh.
It might not be an actual SSRI, but it's like a depression medication. But I was
Uh-huh.
also on. So Remeron is like a dream medication. It's used for other stuff too, but it blocks your brain waves from moving a certain way across your brain, which
Whoa.
stops nightmares. It
Whoa.
was so funky because I could still dream, but I wouldn't have nightmares. It was wild.
Would you have like awesome dreams or just like not bad dreams?
Just like not bad dreams. It was so weird.
But
I can't
that's
explain
what
it.
contributed to the weight gain?
Yeah. And so I started
Uh,
gaining weight and I was like, what is happening to me? And they're like, oh, did we not tell you that like Remeron, you can just like look at food and you'll gain weight? I was like, Jesus Christ. So it was like, well, I also, my therapist asked, she was like, so are you suicidal at all? I was like, definitely not. And let me explain how not suicidal I am. There was this board in Afghanistan that I fantasized about stepping on, and I never did. And she was like, yeah, we call that suicidal. I was like,
yeah,
what? It's
yeah,
like, that's called an ideation. And you were doing that all day, every day, all the time. I was like, yeah, okay, then I was very suicidal.
yeah. Oh, you
um,
hadn't even recognized at that point. Okay.
I
You
have no
didn't
idea.
recognize the shift. You didn't recognize the stark shift in your state of mind from board staring at the board time into kind of like in this more recovery mode, and like it was all just kind of blending into one. You didn't see like faces. Okay.
Well, the phase that happened was I started having panic attacks, and I didn't understand why. And she's like, "Well, it's because for 6 years straight, you were in persistent fight or flight mode. You
Hmm.
were in deployment mode.
Yeah.
So finally, you're like getting mental health help. You're not going back to Afghanistan. You're going to get out of the army. Your body started to relax.
Yeah.
So that's when I started to get flashbacks. That's when I started to get panic attacks. Like I did some more training in Arizona. Um, and Arizona looks a hell of a lot like Afghanistan. And so I stepped out of the hotel room once and just like looked at the mountains and was like, oh God. And just had that like
Hmm.
almost cinematic like flashback moment of being like back there. And I
Hmm.
was like, this has never happened to me. And I've been in Arizona before. Like, what is happening? I was like, well, because your circumstances have changed. You're finally more relaxed.
Right.
So it was just this whole like mind bending, like crazy situation. But I started to understand what was going on. I started to process things, and I started to like teach myself to fall back in love with the army so that I could leave it on good terms.
Right.
And it was so, so, so good.
And they're the
My
ones providing this therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I was meeting her once a week. My work partner had just gotten out of the army and then was like back in as a civilian. And she's still like my best friend. I still talk to her every Friday night. We have a like video chat. And
This is
she
the
was
same
like,
guy. Is this the same girl from when you were deployed?
no, 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 no.
Oh.
But she that was also like that was a very intense friendship. And my therapist was later like, hey, like I can't diagnose other people who are not present, but just like go home and read the Wikipedia page for borderline personality disorder, and that might help you understand this friendship with this person too.
Which one?
And the one from the deployment.
Okay.
And that did really help because she was a really good intelligence officer and we did a lot of good work, but also like it was a very intense, like intimate friendship for being like that fast. And then
Okay.
when the deployment was over, she was like, um, let's never talk again. And my head was just so spinning and confused. Like, what are you talking about? And she's like, yeah, I I hate everyone and it's all bad. You know, it was like a switch flipped and we were just like no longer friends. And I was
Oh,
like, I don't know what's going like this is someone who'd experienced just a lifetime of trauma, like
right.
childhood abuse, abuse from every like romantic partner she'd ever had, like and then obviously like traumatic wartime abuse, traumatic sexual violence, like so she had a
Jesus.
lot going on. It was very but I was like super confused and my therapist was like, I know you're like mourning this friendship. It might help if you read about borderline personality disorder. I'm like, oh, that does make a lot more sense. Like that is probably part of what was also going on.
Right.
But you know, I was able to like do this really fun job where like I'm just helping people out and like instead of like reading intense violence reports every day, I'm like helping little intelligence teams like get better at their jobs. And like it's great. And it was so, so great and healing. And like my wife's in grad school, so she's not even going to work in uniform. We had our second daughter, and I'm like, I'm taking them to daycare. I'm taking care of them in the evening because my wife's school is all at night. And so I'm like putting them to bed and cleaning up the house and like loving it. It felt so great to be like connecting to my family and not being obsessed with Afghanistan anymore, as at least as much, and just like trying to discover who I was outside of Afghanistan. I told my therapist early on, she's like, can you talk about yourself without talking about Afghanistan? And I couldn't do it. I was like, I don't know who I am without that.
Mhm.
And so one of my favorite things that came from that, right before I got out of the army, I have a friend from actually from that elementary school that Dave and I went to,
Mhm.
who's an artist. She like is a professional freelance artist. And I'd had her paint a sunset for me once that was like it was a photo of a sunset from my daughter's first birthday when I was in Kandahar. And it's like one of the best sunsets I'd ever seen. But I had her do another one where, here, I'll show you. I had a photo that someone took of me on a patrol. And when I got home, one of the things I started doing was, and I didn't know why I was doing this, but I was taking photos from the deployment and like using PowerPoint to Photoshop myself out of them and like leave behind just like a black silhouette. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, but this feels like this is touching something that makes me feel good. And so I asked her, I want one painting that's like that. It's this patrol, but then you take me and you paint me out, and it's just leaving behind a black silhouette. But another one that's all just blank, white, empty space, but then it's me on that patrol. I was like, I don't quite get why I need this, but I want you to paint it. And so she did, and it's pretty cool. So we've got, so this is like me out on a patrol, but like painting it out, right? And then like suspended in space.
Whoa.
And so finally at the end, like when I was finishing up with my therapist and everything, I was like, I think I finally am understanding this. It's like I'd lost who I was over there. Like I was just becoming this like I didn't know who I was or what I was doing. And therapy was starting to like finally bring me back home and like pull me back out of that. And I just love that set of paintings so much. It just says to me that like getting help was so critical to like my survival and understanding what was going on with me. So I was just like, I've got to tell every service member I know, like, just get the help, man. Like, don't try and tough it out. Don't try and like be too cool for therapy or like too tough or too badass. And also don't think that trauma, you haven't earned trauma because you haven't done as much as someone else. Like, go. I haven't done as much as a lot of people, but like it probably saved my life. And I could have spent the rest of my life being upset that I hadn't done as much as other people and feeling ashamed. But really, like, that doesn't help anybody. And it doesn't help me. It doesn't help other people. It's just a way to keep myself in prison. And so instead, just saying, like, no, like, I got fucked up over there. And over the course of 4 very different and intense for different reasons combat deployments, like, I came home fucked up and I needed help to get better. And like that's still a journey. Like I still go to the VA and I have a therapist here who's awesome. Um, Now what I work on a lot more instead of like processing, because like I'm a fucking analyst. I will process all day. I'll do homework. I love therapy homework. I'll write you essays. I'll analyze my thoughts and emotions and feelings. I'll do it all. But really what I need now is more of the like be at peace with the moment you're in, ride the wave of what you're feeling. Don't get caught up in like focusing on the negative self-talk and the negative aspects of what's going on. Just like let your life happen and be present for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I'm working on now. And it's really fun. For the first time, I had a doctor's appointment. And since like 2015, because my anxiety is so high and like the PTSD takes a toll on your body, right? Like in the same way that all kind of mental health and all trauma takes a toll on your body, even if it's mostly mental. My blood pressure was always so high when I got it taken at a doctor's office. Eventually, like if I would do one of those things where you go back every morning and do it, it would be fine. But like the process of getting it taken would get me all keyed up again.
Yeah.
So after like I've been doing this work for 6 months with my current therapist, I go to the doctor, they put the cuff around me, and I just like start kind of going through this like little mindfulness exercise we've been doing. And the nurse takes the cuff off. She's like, great, looks really good. And I hadn't heard that in like 8 years. I was like, Oh my God. Like, look at that, baby. Like,
Yeah, that's
it's so
objective
great.
evidence that it's working. That's like objective evidence that you've improved, other than
It was so
your
exciting.
qualitative psychological state. That's fucking awesome. How often do you go to therapy now? Like, what's your regimen with the VA and shit? How's that work?
Um, I had been going once a week. In October, we stretched it to once every 2 weeks. And then when I went, I guess a week and a half ago, now we're stretching it to like every 3 weeks, and we're gonna see how that
Nice.
goes.
Yeah.
Like it's going really well.
Do
Um,
do you feel like you have to have a therapist who's, or I guess the better question is, have you ever had a therapist that's seen combat?
no, I had the first psychiatrist I had was a former Marine from like Vietnam era,
Oh
but I only
shit.
had him for like 2 sessions, and then he retired.
Okay.
So like he was the first person to tell me like, hey, here's some of the things you're experiencing. Like, we have diagnosed you with PTSD. We have medications that can help you with this. Like, I'm going to describe to you that there are definitions for what you're experiencing and there are solutions. And
Right.
things happened to you, and you're allowed to experience them. Like, and I was like, it was remarkable. I was like, I feel so relieved to hear that. I had no idea I needed to hear that, but I did. But then he left right after that. But it was like a really important step.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
then
It's like
after
you
that,
gotta have
I've
as one
just
of your first dudes.
yeah, I've had just civilians since then. Now most of them have had like, a lot of military clients. So they know what to do. I mean,
Right, right, right. Yeah, I don't
but
think, just wondering.
it's interesting. Yeah. I'm a lot more of a therapist to my friends who have been in more serious combat. Like people talk to me about that all the time.
Oh, that stuff that, yeah, that's true. There's probably, is there shit that like, do you find that from military friends that there's stuff that like they feel like their therapist can't quite understand, or that there's only a role that people that have seen combat can understand? Is there something there?
It's a lot more people who don't want to go to therapy yet are afraid to make it official, but they know I've been in therapy and they know
Right,
that I kind of understand. Like
right,
they know like you've seen enough that you'll understand me when I'm telling you the things that happened to me.
right,
And so like we'll sit down and we'll talk about like the shit they've been through. And I love that, but I'm also like, also you can go to a real therapist because I'm
right.
just a guy. I'm just a fucking guy.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
will
but
listen
there's
to you.
value in that, I'm sure.
I will hug you and hold you and tell you you're valid and I love you. But also, like, I'm not a fucking professional. I have a
Yeah,
bachelor of science degree in history. I can't do anything to actually help you.
yeah,
So, I like to see it as a little like stepping stone to help people like, hey, I'll listen to you as long as you want. But also, there's another way you can get some real help. And
yeah.
that's often I've some of my friends have started to actually get real help after that, and that's been really great.
What do you want to do going forward? How old are the kids, and like, what's your the family's game plan for what you and your wife want to do, and what are y'all thinking?
So we've got a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old, first and third grade. They're amazing. They're really kick-ass kids. They're pretty smart, which I can see like down the road will be kind of that like anxiety problem. Like I get it. Like we can
Yeah,
anticipate some of these issues, but
yeah.
they're also like my third grader's like she became a junior librarian because she's like in the school library 3 days a week or 3 days, 3 times a day. And they were like, well, do you want to help like
Good
reshelve
job.
books? Like she's like, hell yeah, I do. So like these kids are going to be like adorable little nerds, which is going to be its own set of challenges. But
They
like
do well in school, like they get good grades. Yeah,
they do like maybe too well in school. Like they're going to have the same problem that my parents had, which is like in high school, my parents were like, hey, why don't you try and like break curfew once in a while?
yeah,
Like go on some dates or something.
yeah.
Like but for now, like I'm a stay-at-home dad. My wife is still in the army. Um,
What does
I,
she do
I
now?
she is a it's called an ORSA. It's like a research data analyst for the army. So she does a lot of like long-term Army problem solving is kind of the job. It's kind of a corporate idea. Like she has an MBA, and
Yeah.
most of them either have statistics or MBA kind of advanced degrees.
It's like a nine to
Um,
five.
yeah, pretty much. Like it's
Yeah.
not bad. And she's probably going to get out right at 20 years. So that's 2030. And I still have my full GI Bill. So I'm waiting. I would like to get back to the East Coast to use it. Um, and so for right now, the plan is just to stay a stay-at-home dad. I do almost all the cooking, all the like major cleaning, a lot of house planning and taking care of the kids. And it's pretty great. I
Are
mean,
you gonna go to college when your kids go to college? You go to college with your kids? My grandma
maybe,
and mom
man,
did that actually.
I might. Because it's funny, when my wife went to grad school, let's see, how old were we then? We're like 30, 31 when she started grad school. And so most of her classmates are like 24, 25. And so we
Hmm.
seemed like the old couple. Like
Hmm.
we owned a house and we owned
Yeah,
cars, and
kids.
we would have them over and I would cook like these extravagant like meals for them because they were just eating ramen other than
Right.
that. And now I'm like, God, when I go back to school, I'm going to be so much older.
Oh
But
yeah.
like, I honestly don't mind that. I would
No,
love
I
to
don't
be
either.
at school in person so that I can like, I don't know, have a place to go. I miss the feeling of like having like a job that you feel born to do is pretty
Yeah,
special.
yeah.
So like I don't feel born to be like a stay-at-home dad. I think I'm really good at it and that's fine.
Hmm.
And there's a lot that I get out of it. And I think there's a huge amount that my kids get out of it. But I do miss a little bit the like, remember when people would tell you how great you were at your job?
Okay,
You
yeah,
know,
dude,
like
yeah, yeah.
I do miss that. And so someday it would be cool to have a like real job again. I see it probably being like, if I had to guess right now, I would put myself in like the park service, giving briefings on like cool national park things that talk about how we're all part of this like human experience together. And that's why, this national park or this battlefield or this moment in our history matters, like I would love something like that.
Hmm.
But we'll see. I'm trying to be flexible. um, it might be great if right when my wife gets out of the army I start grad school, because that's paid for and you get a stipend, and that would be like a way to support the family while she figures out what she wants to do. So we're kind of like leapfrogging who's kind of the main income earner.
Hmm.
So we'll see. I'm really lucky. I don't think a lot of military people have a spouse like mine. Mine's like really, really flexible for this kind of thing and really practical. Like, she's not an emotional person. She's a really like practical, let's figure this out and sort through it. She was really confused by some of the like mental health problems, but was also like, I don't get what's going on, but let's figure it out. And is really good. Like, I probably haven't had a panic attack since last summer, but when they happen, she's like, she knows what to do. She can like handle it and like, why don't you lie down and I'll just kind of sit next to you and we'll sort this out and like bring you water and help with grounding and kind of like bring you back to this planet and it'll be okay. Like she's awesome. And our kids are really great. So I'm very lucky that like the domestic challenges that a lot of military people have not been as big of a problem for me.
Yeah, dude. I mean, that's fucking worst case scenario if all of a sudden kids are being affected and next, yeah, ugh, mess. Would you what would you say to a young person, high school graduate, college graduate who wanted to join the army, the military? Would you encourage them to do it? Would that depend on their life circumstances, their particular outlook in life, or what do you think?
I would always say my initial reaction is, yeah, do it. My second reaction is to say, look at who you are. Look at, is this the best way you think you want to, like, say if your motivation is service? There are also other ways to serve. Like, my sister was in the Peace Corps. There are other, like, State Department and other, like, really cool ways to serve public interests, national interests. So I have that conversation with a lot of people who want to join the army and can't. So I've talked to like high schoolers who want to but have some kind of medical problem and can't, or like My friend hooked me up with one of the officers he was working with had a kid in RTC, but he had a seizure issue, and was like, "Can you just talk to him about how you had that?" And we
David
talked
Mayo
about
was
like,
not.
here's how it was for me, and if you end up not being able to be in the army, that doesn't mean that your life is over, or that like you can't serve your country, or you can't feel fulfilled doing something else. Like there are other options too. But like for me, the army was so great. And yeah, there was damage. There were consequences. There are consequences doing any job. And this is also like a high stakes, high risk, high reward kind of thing. Like I lived on that razor's edge for a long time. And there's like nothing, I don't know if there's something I could compare it to. Like I feel immeasurably lucky that I got to have that experience. And there are consequences to it. But if you're like, hey, I signed up for that, I would rather be the one that has to like sort out the damage from that if it saves someone else from that and it's like a worthwhile cause.
Mm-hmm.
And like I'm proud of my service. I'm proud of what I did and proud of the way I did it. Like I don't feel like I ever had to compromise who I was to do it. And so if you want to serve in the military, I think it's a really great avenue to feel connected to serving other people, to I mean for a lot of people who join the army, to getting a step forward economically you might not have otherwise. Like if you grow up really poor and there aren't a lot of natural avenues in the way our country's kind of currently set up, the
Mm-hmm.
army can give you a lot of those advantages. You can go to college for free. You can like get a VA loan and maybe own a house. How
Mm-hmm.
many millennials do you know that own a house?
Yeah.
Like way fewer than the other generations ahead of us. But if you're in the army, you got a lot better shot at owning a house someday. You know, like there are a lot of benefits, but I also like to be upfront and say there are a lot of costs. And if you're not willing to be like committed, I don't know that you should go that way. Like if you're not willing to fight, maybe don't. Maybe find another way, you
Yeah.
know. I don't
Dude,
know.
this is a random, like, totally off the wall question. But what was your exposure to opium production and like the growth of poppy by Afghans?
Hi. Hold on one second. Come here, buddy. Um, so it was always kind of a fringe concern, but my last deployment, it became really problematic because a lot of the opium production and smuggling was happening from the Afghan army side. So,
Uh-huh.
like, in addition to my job was never like counter narcotic, but there, there's one time, once a month, we would plan a major joint operation with our partners. And so part of my job was to identify, like, okay, within our area of operations, where would be a good place for us to like interdict the movement of weapons. And so because our area was so small, it was pretty easy for them to avoid our specific area of operations for weapons. But I found this village where I was like, okay, weapons and drugs are moving through this village. And so the plan was, you know, set up a perimeter around it with our guys. Then the Afghan soldiers move in. They search, you know, places that look like they might have weapons and drugs. You know, collect what you can, take it home, and great mission. Good job. What I didn't know at the time was that it was a weapons and drug facilitation place, but it was our partners' weapons and drug facilitation. So the Afghan dudes show up and they realize there's this heavy hitter Afghan dude, Lieutenant General Razik. He has since been assassinated, but at the time he was like the big heavy hitter in all of southern Afghanistan. He was basically funding a major amount of the Afghan military forces through opium production. So he's like making millions of dollars a month through opium and then turning that around for weapons and supplies and support for the Afghan forces. So these Afghan dudes show up to the village and they're like, well, we know this is like a Razik village. We're not going to like disrupt his drug operation. That's like paying for our uniforms.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're getting the radio reports are coming back and they're like, well, they're not really going into the village or doing anything. I'm like, what are you talking?
They're
Like,
smoking
what's going
opium,
on?
actually.
And they're like, yeah, we think we're good. Let's pack it up and go home. Good mission. And we're like, well, you didn't do anything. And then we're making phone calls and like calling their commanders and calling their commanders. And then like we get to a level of the command where they're like, we're aware of the things happening and we think everyone did a good job and should go home. And that's when we were like,
Okay.
okay, got
Yeah.
it. That
So let's
was
go. So what's going on?
like, I was right, but it wasn't the Taliban.
Right.
There's another one where, we're doing airstrikes that the Afghans had called for. Like Afghan forces in combat would call on our aircraft to support them with airstrikes in ways that previous and other times in the war they just wouldn't have done. There were so many American ground forces, you would just communicate that through Americans. Well, one of our higher headquarters conducted an airstrike on. We were told it was like, you know, a Taliban cell of like 15 or 20 guys. We can see their guys in trucks with machine guns and weapons. They do the strike. And then when they did like evaluation of it later, find out, well, they were also all in like Afghan police uniforms. Also, it wasn't really like combat, they were doing drug facilitation. And then we realized what we think happened was one of the Afghan groups called in a hit on their rival drug producers.
Whoa.
And so they used us to like put a hit on another opium route.
Whoa.
That was pretty wild. My favorite time was there was a counter narcotics Afghan group that had assembled like thousands of pounds of marijuana and opium right outside the base, and they were burning it. And so it was like, I mean, stay out of the smoke, I guess. Like, it's just this huge pillar of like opium smoke from this enormous bonfire of just drugs. And it was like, is this the best way to do this? Like, this seems like a real shady way to like,
You just sold it.
how else do you get rid? I don't know. Like,
sell it.
But yeah, I mean, I definitely encountered a lot of, I didn't get the opportunity. If I had been a couple of years earlier in kind of an infantry unit, I probably would have gotten to patrol a lot of like poppy fields and weed fields. But because earlier in my deployments, I was more on the bases, and it wasn't until later I got to my more like heavy patrol deployments. I didn't get as much opportunity to just like walk around the poppy fields.
Yeah.
I have a bunch of friends with like these gorgeous pictures of them like patrolling through opium fields.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because they're beautiful, but it's also like, I got very familiar with opium production and how like scoring all the, poppy bulbs and collection of the resin, how the resin gets processed into tar, how the tar gets put into bricks, how the bricks get moved, and like the phases of production and the, smuggling lines. So I got really familiar with that, but like
just through intel and shit and talking to people.
Just for, like, yeah, talking to people, research to try and understand how the facilitation was going, how it was connected to the funding for insurgents, and like connected to weapons movement. Because like, if you've got a successful weapons line or a successful drug line, why not use it for the other? Like, if my drugs are moving out well, hey, let's move weapons the other way. So drugs move this way, weapons move that way. So I'm always trying to find weapons. And if I'm finding weapons, that means I'm also kind of finding drugs on the other side of it. So it was really interesting intellectually, but it didn't have a lot to do with my like day-to-day options or life.
Yeah.
But it's wild.
Damn. I mean, I wasn't expecting that extensive an answer. It sounds like it's fucking going on. All right, dog.
Yeah, I gotta get these kids in the bathtub. So
I'm always wondering, where are these kids?
Because we keep doing this on the weekends, it's like they're allowed to watch a movie on the weekends. So it's like they eat their dinner with a little tray and get to watch a movie, and it's great.
That's awesome. Well, dog, I'll be seeing you soon.
See you in a week and a half, right?
Sir.
Yeah, week and a half. I'm excited, man.
Me too, man.
I'm pumped. This little guy won't be there, but
I'll be the most connected to you. I mean, I've talked to you much more extensively than anyone else at that wedding. It's so weird
no, man, same. I'm pumped to see you. I get to see my wife, who's super cool.
I know. Dope.
Yeah.
All right, brother. Well, I'll see you soon then.
I'll see you soon, man. You take it easy.
All right, man. Thanks for doing this, Marshall. I really appreciate it, man.
Always.
All right, dog. Peace. Bye, Pop.